Good morning, everyone. CTV News is reporting Poilievre, the most likely contender to succeed Scheer, Conservative insider. And this is reported December 22nd, 2019. That was yesterday. Longtime Conservative strategist Jason Leiter is placing his bets on Tory MP Pierre Poilievre as the likely successor to former party leader Andrew Scheer. Speaking on CTV's Question Period airing Sunday, Leiter said the current finance critic's swift ground game has positioned himself ahead of the pack of potential frontrunners. Quote, while other people are sort of sleeping and trying to figure out should I be in, should I be out, Pierre's working. He's been across Canada the last couple of days, says Leiter. He is going to be either a strong second place or win this thing. Poilievre first teased the notion of putting forward a bid on Monday during a scrum with reporters on Parliament Hill. In a subsequent Question Period interview, Poilievre said he's consulting with his family about the decision to put his name forward. Quote, we'll see what they have to say over turkey dinner and report back to you, said Poilievre. Donning his finance hat, the shadow minister said any future leader of the Conservative Party needs to be prepared to, quote, unleash the economy, bring back free enterprise so that Canadians can advance and achieve their full potential. Poilievre has been a member of Parliament since 2004 and has served as a minister in both of Stephen Harper's cabinets. He was appointed to Andrew Scheer's shadow cabinet in 2017. He was, if not one of the top performers in the Conservative caucus in the House of Commons over the last couple of years. Number two, he is driven and he's got a team that seems ready to go, said Leiter. Several names have been floated as possible contenders to replace Scheer. Conservative MPs Michelle Rempel, Gardner, and Candice Bergen, former cabinet minister Peter MacKay, and former interim leader Rona Ambrose, and former Quebec Premier Jean Charest are among them. And I've not really been following the leadership race yet. It hasn't heated up. They haven't, as I said at the top, they haven't really got the infrastructure in place to start their leadership race. So, not that there's no stories. There's lots of stories. Peter MacKay's a story. It's a story that Peter MacKay's not more popular. Poilievre is more popular. Rona Ambrose has been shoved down everybody's throats for the last couple of weeks saying, oh, it's going to be Rona Ambrose. So it leads me to believe it's not going to be Rona Ambrose. I don't think that I think I said Bergen, but I think it's Bergen, and Michelle Rempel, I don't think that they're going to be strong leadership contenders. They're fine, but I mean, Miss Rempel is known as Miss Blocks a lot, and Candice Bergen is less known. So I don't think that they're as strong as Peter MacKay, Poilievre, and Rona Ambrose. I would say are the top three if I were picking top three. And Charest, just because of his time in Quebec, I mean that's almost an automatic 80 seats, 70 seats, however many seats are in Quebec. That's a lot of seats in Quebec just because the Conservative Party has never had a really, really good shot at inroads in Quebec. Scheer is fluent in French, but he didn't really catch fire in Quebec, right? Like I would have thought that the border issue would have been more of an issue with the Quebecois, and I thought Trudeau would have been less popular, but I mean, he put together a pretty solid win with Ontario and Quebec, right? The minority parliament we're currently with. So I think that Charest has a shot, certainly, and probably deserves to be in the top three. So I don't know who I'd remove though. Yep. Yeah. So yeah. That's who I'd take out. Rona Ambrose, I would remove, just because I think she's being bolstered by the media. I know she's long in the tooth. I think she's too much of a red Tory. And if the party wants to go that way, maybe this isn't so important. Maybe, but who knows? Who knows? There's a lot to speculate on, and well, who knows? Deloitte's going to be there. They're going to watch somebody else count the votes, and 49%, and who knows? Who knows? The Toronto Sun is reporting, this was reported on December 21st, and it says, mentally ill lone wolf who attacked Canadian soldiers, not a terrorist. Anyal Hassan Ali, the mentally ill man who attacked military personnel at a Yonge Street recruiting center 3 years ago, will not be retried as a terrorist. Ontario's highest court agreed with the trial judge who found Section 83-2 3.2 of the Criminal Code, the anti-terrorism section enacted by Parliament after 9/11, isn't designed to capture a, quote, lone wolf. In May 2018, Superior Court Justice Ian McDonnell acquitted Ali on the terror part of the indictment, finding that while he was motivated by extremist beliefs linked to his mental illness, he wasn't acting on behalf of any terror group. Instead, the judge found him not criminally responsible for the lesser included offenses of attempted murder, assault causing bodily harm, and possession of a dangerous weapon. Federal prosecutors had urged the appeal court to order a new trial on the terrorism charges, insisting McDonald was mistaken and Ali did act, quote, for the benefit of, at the direction of, or in association with a terrorist group, a group comprised of himself alone. Quote, lone wolf terrorists are a serious problem in Canada and abroad, and their recent successes may inspire others, they contended in a document filed with the court earlier this year. The trial judge's interpretation impedes the ability to arrest and charge the lone wolf. The appeal court disagreed. Scroll down. And so, when Ali is 31, and I guess I'll read this. Quote, that the principal and terrorist group may be one and the same person is inconsistent with modern principle of statutory interpretation, wrote Justice David Watt on behalf of the three-member panel. It is reasonable inference that Parliament did not intend that S 83.2 would apply to the lone wolf terrorist. And so when Ali, 31, is deemed mentally healthy enough to be released from his current residence in the secure forensic unit at the Hamilton's St. Joseph's Health Center, he would not be saddled with the terrorist label. Yet Ali's belief system hasn't changed much since he stormed into the Canadian Forces Recruiting Center in North York on March 14, 2016. And I just scroll down to the end here. It says, according to his psychiatrist, he's still receiving messages from the internet and TV telling him he's being watched by the military. More troubling, quote, Mr. Ali still believes that military are a legitimate target, and this belief remains a risk issue. The good news, the ORB says, is, quote, Ali is no longer looking to become a martyr. If they get, quote, his beliefs under control, the review board predicts there's a, quote, reasonable likelihood he'll be allowed passes of up to 48 hours to visit his family in Toronto, to be supervised only by his father and sister. Good thing he's not a terrorist. Yeah, right. And this is, I don't do a lot of financial stories. I think they're dry. It's hard to communicate numbers. It sounds like you're watching a baseball game, just somebody reading statistics. So I try and stay away from that. But this one's kind of interesting. It's talking about how the population growth is buoying our market and our finances. Every other G7 country is dropping their interest rates, but not Canada. And this talks to that. And this talks to why that is happening. Okay, here we go. So I think it's interesting. I think it's a bit more compelling than the usual financial news. And I think it falls right in line with the political zeitgeist, what's going on in our politics right now. Because people are interested in how our money's doing, how our country's doing, how our dollar's doing against the American dollar, and why the continued reliance on the continued growth, the growth of our economy, right? That is the main goal of the government, to make sure that the economy continues to grow. Birth rate be darned, right? Here we go. Okay, Loonie traders buoyed by fastest population growth since 1971. Who was prime minister in 1971? Okay, in an era of low global interest rates. Sorry, I'll pause just to answer that question that I asked. It was kind of rhetorical, but the prime minister in 1971 was, of course, Pierre Trudeau, right? Okay, back to the article. In an era of low global interest rates, currency traders will have to look elsewhere for an impetus. In Canada, they can bank on population growth. The flood of immigrants and non-permanent residents to levels not seen in a century has been one of the main drivers supporting Canada's economic expansion over the past several years. That has kept the Bank of Canada as an outlier in the global easing trend as it held its policy rate unchanged, bolstering the allure of the loonie. These high levels of immigration, if they are to continue and help support growth, are actually supportive of a Canadian dollar over time. Francis Donald, chief economist at Manulife Investment Management, said in an interview in Toronto. And here's the graph. It's an interactive graph, so you can see how things stack up since 1971 and 2019, right? So there's 2019, 0.5%, and there's 1971, Q1. Anyway, doesn't matter. Back to the article. The country's population grew by 208,234 in the July to September period, or just over 0.5%, 0.6%. The fastest 0.6%. The fastest quarterly increase since at least 1971. Some 83% of that increase is due to international migration, according to estimates from Statistics Canada released Thursday in Ottawa. Over the past year, Canada's population has jumped by almost 560,000, an increase of 1.5%. That's the fastest annual pace since 1990. Quote, this is the story I think markets are missing, how powerful immigration is actually changing your financial markets, particularly in particularly your rates and FX, Donald said. The Canadian dollar is on pace to take the number one spot among its group of 10 counterparts this year, strengthened by more than 3% against the US dollar. Canada's population boom has driven robust gains in the housing and labor markets, countering the effects of an aging demographic. This has helped to avoid the Japanification trap of low growth, low inflation, low interest rates that are slowly becoming evident in other parts of the world. What's fascinating about the story, however, from a strategist like myself, is not even how it relates to GDP growth, but how we're substituting one form of policy for another, Donald said. While Donald argues immigration can be a proxy for monetary policy, currency strategists say the central bank is still the main driver of the loonie, and immigration is more of a long-term variable that can influence policy. Immigration informs the output gap and has policy stance, wrote Menza Isa, senior FX strategist at TD Securities in Toronto. FX will react to how the bank changes policy. Now, I'm not a finance guy. I don't know what all this vernacular is, the FX and all that other stuff. I should understand a bit better, but I don't, so I apologize. But I still think it's interesting. Last little bit here. Case in point, Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Pulitz has cited the country's robust labor force supported by new entrants as a reason for holding interest rates despite concerns around a slowdown. The nation's population growth may be masking a deeper economic problem that could hamper long-term growth. Over the past 2 years, Canada's productivity hasn't grown at all. Relying on human capital to improve growth and inflation numbers over time actually acts as a curve steepener, Donald said. If we rely on the so-called human stimulus, then we don't have to rely on monetary policy to the same extent. So, again, I'm not a finance guy, but I think that talking about the impact, the fiscal impact specifically, of immigration on Canada and what it's doing to us compared to, and I mean, our population is much smaller than the United States. So what it's doing to us with comparing to our peers, to our counterparts, and what's happening on the ground in the country. I mean, I was following Twitter yesterday, and the amount of people hit by vehicles, the amount of shootings, the amount of violence, just out and out of violence. Like, there were teenagers killed yesterday. A bunch of teenagers just killed. Somebody ran them over in the street. There's a 4-year-old crushed yesterday. It was just unbelievable on Twitter. Wild stuff. And I'm not saying necessarily that the immigration has to do with the 4-year-old being crushed. I didn't look into that story too much. I was just talking more about the violence there. But the correlation of the increase in violence recently with the open borders and with Justin Trudeau's term is worrying. And that trend is not weakening, right? So it's worth talking about. It's worth mentioning. Like, hey, have you guys noticed this? And this is what it's doing to our economy. Our rates are staying high because people are saying that's going to be strengthening things. And I mean, potatoes, right? But it's all part of the soup that we all have to live in, right? It's all there, and impacting life, right? You look at the paper. It's not discussing the finer points of fiscal policy, right? It's bludgeoning you with violence and racist and division and all sorts of stuff that is, well, really, really different than the front page of the Toronto Star 25 years ago, right? I remember going to Toronto. I remember my grandmother had recycling boxes in the back full of Toronto Stars, and we didn't get the paper, so I would look through them, and I thought they were cool. And I used to be a Guelph Mercury paper boy, right? I used to deliver the paper, but I liked reading the Toronto Star because it was more international, kind of. And it's so different, and that's anecdotal. That's totally my experience, but it's notably different. So Christmas Eve, that's where we're at. The state of Canada in 2019. I thought 2020 would be more futuristic, right? Well, here we are, and it seems the future is a lot more like the past, except that we've got maps in our pocket and, well, a supercomputer, I guess, in our pocket. Unbelievable. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com and have a wonderful, wonderful